All right, Sue Mi Terry is a former CIA officer, a researcher, a former intelligence analyst who specialized in East Asia and is an expert on international politics involving North and South Korea. Welcome, Sue Mi.
Thank you for having me on.
Can you first of all tell me why now this meeting in Vladivostok in Russia between President Putin and Kim Jong-un?
Well, there are two leaders that are completely isolated from the world, and there's a mutual interest that are served by meeting at this point. Putin needs badly needed, ammunition for his war efforts in Ukraine, and Kim Jong-un needs food aid and fuel, and more than that, technical support for his military satellites, for his long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, for nuclear power submarine. So it makes sense from Putin and Kim Jong-un's perspective to meet now. And COVID restrictions, we're just coming out of pandemic. So it makes sense from both of their perspectives.
Do you believe that this is a new road that the Russians are paving? Or do you think that in fact, behind the scenes, Russia was already supplying technology? I mean, a lot of people are saying that the last intercontinental ballistic missile test by North Korea looked remarkably similar to the Russian technology on the Topol M missile, for instance.
Well, first, I think it's pretty pathetic and ironic that Russia, which used to be, this nuclear power country that's a patron and was the one who was aiding North Korea, is now turning to North Korea, 198th ranked economy in the world that cannot feed its own population, for support. Now, in terms of Russia's support to North Korea, that may be very well true, that Russia has always provided some technology and help. But now this is overt, which means I think it's about degrees, right? They can just amp up much more in terms of supporting North Korea. Now, if you remember in 2017, in the fall of 2017, China and Russia actually implemented sanctions against North Korea. So it's not supposed to be such an overt thing. But now Russia, being internationally isolated itself, I guess doesn't care. So it's about degrees. And I am concerned about this overt technology transfer.
Where could it potentially lead? I mean, I know North Korea wants food and energy, but Russia in return could give things like, nuclear submarine technology. And North Korea already has a very advanced nuclear program. What's the danger here?
Well, Kim Jong-un's goal is to perfect his nuclear weapons program, his WMD program. He's been expanding, modernizing his nuclear and missile arsenal. North Korea tested some 80 missiles last year. So this will help North Korea further advance and perfect their program. Last month, North Korea rolled out a diesel-based submarine. Now they can have nuclear submarines. So this is not good news. It's a win-win for Putin and Kim Jong-un, but this is not good news for the United States and the West.
Why do you think that Russia, first of all, signed on to the sanctions in the first place? I mean, some people said that they were worried about North Korea themselves, and they were in fear of perhaps the satellite program that North Korea is after. So why do a 180-degree turnabout now for some artillery shells, in essence? I mean, millions of artillery shells, and it's critical in the war effort. But I mean, President Putin is walking a dangerous road here.
He's walking a dangerous road, but Russia's number one priority right now is winning the war in Ukraine. And this is a war about supply lines. And so he needs his ammunition. So he's turning to North Korea. Now, when Putin actually decided to implement sanctions in the fall of 2017, this was under the Trump era. Remember this, fire and fury era, when President Trump was calling Kim Jong-un a rocket man on a suicide mission. So there was a concern that there could have been a conflict. So Russia and China surprisingly implemented sanctions. But now it's no longer 2017. It's a very different world that we're living in. And there's a loose alliance relationship between Russia and China and North Korea. And, Putin and Kim Jong-un's meeting is really a meeting of, this unholy duo, right? This is not good, as I said. But I think Putin is focused more on Russia's war on Ukraine. So he needs help from North Korea, and North Korea has a large stockpile of munitions.
What does this marriage of despots bring us?
Well, it threatens the region further. This will help Russia's war efforts in Ukraine, so that makes that situation more dangerous. It will help modernize and expand North Korea's nuclear weapons program, which will make North Korea more dangerous to the region, to South Korea, to Japan, and to the rest of the world. So this is, again, not, from US's perspective and West perspective, this is very concerning development.
Do you believe that Russia and North Korea sought the blessing of China for this, if you want to call it an unholy alliance, but it's an alliance nonetheless?
It's interesting how much China knows and how much China will approve of this. I think it's complicated, and China is the wild card here. North Korea traditionally has always sort of played China and Russia off one another, right? Remember going back to Sino-Soviet rivalry. And by relying on Russia, it will reduce North Korea's dependence on China, which China would not like. So I think China is going to look at this whole situation with a little bit of weary eye. So we'll see how Beijing responds, but it's a little bit complicated from China's perspective.
It's a little bit complicated from Washington's perspective too. I mean, here you have the spokesman yesterday, wagging his finger at Russia, saying, and North Korea, saying that they better not start trading in weapons and that there will be consequences. I mean, they have been, putting a tighter hold on the throat of North Korea for several decades, and the nuclear program has just gone ahead regardless.
Absolutely. Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, said there's going to be a price to pay. But in reality, what price? Both countries are already very isolated. In terms of sanctioning North Korea, for sanctions to be effective, China and Russia have to implement sanctions, and they have not been doing that in recent years. So what more can we do to North Korea? The talks between Washington and Pyongyang have completely broken down. There's a complete impasse between Washington and Pyongyang. So I'm not sure what price. North Korea conducted 80 tests last year, missile tests, all in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. Did United Nations Security Council respond in any way? China and Russia and UNSC could not even come up with a condemnation of these launches. So again, price to pay, I don't know what price. There's not a whole lot of options here in terms of pressuring North Korea.
What are the options? If you say there's not very many, are there any? And what would they be?
Well, the options are what the Biden administration is already doing, which is to strengthen trilateral relationship between United States, South Korea, and Japan to make sure that we're all on the same page in responding to future North Korean provocations. President Biden did host President Yoon Suk-yeol of South Korea and Prime Minister Kishida of Japan at Camp David. Thankfully, Korea and Japan relationship has improved. Now that we're going to do trilateral military exercises, there's going to be a greater information, intelligence sharing. And so in terms of trying to stop this meeting and stop this trade, I think that's very difficult to do at this moment.
Last question to you. Your impressions of Kim Jong-un, who was largely silent during the pandemic, disappeared for months at a time. What do you think is happening to him, with him, in North Korea?
Well, Kim is rapidly expanding his WMD program, but internally, the economic situation is quite dire. North Korea was the first country to close the border with China at the beginning of COVID pandemic in January 2020. So the economic situation is dire in the sense that that border closure did more to had more of an impact in North Korea's economy than sanctions ever could. So there's internal situation that's bad in terms of food shortages and malnutrition and so on. Then, of course, he's still focusing all on expanding his WMD program. So we'll see. I think this is why Kim Jong-un is making this trip to Russia. He's looking for fuel, food aid from Russia, as well as technology transfer to expand his WMD program.
To me, Terry, it's great for you to share your thoughts, and thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on.